It's not that viewable anyway. So there is the living ICC thing going on. There are falling dictatorships and the people with unrest. A bunch of things in Africa, but there is one thing that most African countries share, which is colonialism over a long period. And I'm talking about colonialism that was based on ethnicity and division. So that's basically the identity crisis. It's it's the whole so-called national identity. Why doesn't democracy work when it should in Africa? Why do African states fail? And it's where we're aiming to sort of bridge that gap of national identity and international identity, opposed to mere democracy. Because democracy, as it was seen before the fall of communist states, was the identity of nations. That's how nations viewed themselves. That's how, if you look at China and how it's evolving, its so called communism isn't really communism any longer, right? Their rule of law is completely different, but it works towards their identity, and it's taken them through tragedies that most are still struggling with, because they have that self identity bred within them as national identity first. And what is our national identity? That was a good question. I have to try. Our national identity isn't a religious one, it isn't really a political one, so it isn't good, democracy gone good. Namibia should be this big example. It's not just that, it's about identity. How do Namibians identify themselves? And the way Namibians identify themselves is people who do not want to go through the trauma of war again. This goes from the oldest to the youngest, and it causes a lot of division because you have these enemies of the past that might be enemies in the present, right? And people use that to defame each other. It's bad and it's accidentally working because now people are being forced to show their national identity as opposed to it being written into law and nothing happens. That's what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing sort of an evolution where national identity is starting to take precedence over political identity because people don't trust the political system any longer for good reason, and people do not want to go back to a political system where they were oppressed. This can be compared to what happened to Rome. Rome had a king, very vicious. Their kings were, they were horrible. When they dethroned the king, and Rome became sort of like one of the first republics, they never wanted to have another king again. The title in itself, the title of king, sort of became nigger or kafir. To identify someone in higher office as a king became slender, dangerous, regressive. And I could talk about Julius Caesar and before that, but I want to talk about the present and the current thought that I have on hand right now, which is about is it self-identification, national identification, or political? National identification is winning. Because national identification is winning, it's starting to sort of bridge Namibia to other nations and other countries. They are beginning to look at the workings of the country, right? How do they get the people to be so harmonious? Harmonious as in, how do they sing to the same tune when they have to? And even when it's wrong, you know, there are people that are interested to find out how did they end up singing to the same tune even though it's wrong.